Yo guys, what's up? It's Dan my Titan here, back at it again with another What If, and today I will be doing What If Deku had nanotechnology. Sorry for whispering, my parents are kinda busy at the moment and I don't want to bother them. But anyway, so last time we left off was Deku's all-out brawl with a Nomu, him getting incapacitated, All Might beating up the Nomu, and then getting sent to the hospital with a bit of a gag here and there. So eventually, after they had gone to the restaurant to get something to eat, seeing as Izuku was insistent upon that, they'd gone back to the hotel. Izuku was personally tired and had entered his room immediately after getting there and gone to sleep. He'd woken up near 12 o'clock the night, seeing as he couldn't sleep any further than that. I mean, he did fall asleep at 6, so he's not used to getting a long night's sleep. He would then walk out to his balcony and look up at the moon when he'd feel something off. He'd turn around and see that there was a black portal, and just as the black portal had opened, somebody had stepped through. It was Raven. She was looking at him and asked him, Izuku, did you mean what you said before? Izuku would look at her and ask what she meant, as Raven would say, about protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Izuku would look at her and then flash a bright grin as he'd say, Of course, it's a hero's job. I've always wanted to be a person that could protect others when they couldn't protect themselves, to make them feel safe whenever I was around. But because I'm quirkless, I can't really do that. So I decided I'd rather help them from the shadows. Be a hero without having to be there. It's kind of silly, but at least this way I feel like I'm still helping people. Raven would then look at him dead in the eye as she'd say, It's not silly at all. I think it's actually brave. Many people would have given up after finding out that they couldn't become a hero just because they were powerless. It's different in our world because there's already a hero without powers. He was renowned. He had a lot of money. That's why. Well, he has a lot of money. That's why he's able to do the heroing job, because of all the fancy gadgets and equipment he had. You're doing twice as good as him. Seeing as you didn't have a lot of money, you built everything you had from scratch. Izuku would then look at her and say, "It's nothing special. I'm just working hard because I want to see the people be safe and watch them be fine." And I don't know, maybe at some deep level, I hope someday I could stand in front of them and smile and let them all know it's safe. Izuku would say that last bit, turning away from Raven as he'd look at the moon. Raven would feel the sadness in Izuku as she'd stand next to him and say, It's beautiful out tonight, don't you think? Izuku would then reply with, Yeah, really beautiful. The two would then remain there for another couple of minutes before Izuku would tell her that she should go get some sleep. He can't sleep and thus he'll be tinkering a bit. Raven would nod as she would open up another portal and enter her room again. As she would, she'd see Starfire sitting on the bed, waiting for her. Well, on Starfire's bed, waiting for her to come back, anyways. Raven would ask, Hang on, guys. No! Yay! Starfire would be waiting for Raven on the bed. Well, Starfire's bed, as Starfire would tell her, So, you like him, don't you? Raven would blush hard red as she'd say, No. Starfire would then say that it's okay if you have a crush. It's normal. Raven would then say, So what? He probably doesn't even like me. I mean, I'm not even from this world. Starfire would say, From this world or not, you could still find somebody that likes you. And as for him not liking you, don't be so sure. He's he's focused. He's a driven individual. He must finish his goal before he'll find time for anything else. And if you haven't noticed, have you seen how close he is with Melissa? Raven would nod and say, "Yeah," and this is when Starfire would reply with, "Do you know why?" Raven would say, "No, not really." As Starfire would say, "It's because they work together." You'd constantly see Melissa and Izuku working in the lab, and just as Izuku's about to say something, Melissa would already be there with exactly what he needs to complete that said task. Raven's eyes would widen at the realization the two's a duo. Their, their harmony and synchronicity with each other is on par with nobody else she's ever seen. The two can communicate without communicating, they can work together without having to look at each other. They just feel each other's presence. That's when stuff I would say, you just gotta find the rhythm. Try helping him out. You might find something really interesting. As well, Raven would nod. Hang on, guys, I want to check something real quick. You know what? Let's go check it out together. So, anyway, yeah. Izuku would stay up for the rest of the night as he'd be working in. No. When the I didn't happen. So anyway, I learned through My Hero Academia. You know what? Hang on, let me. Okay, guys, found out when the island happens. So basically, yeah, Izuku stays there for the rest of the night, and he starts tinkering a lot. He tinkers with the nanotechnology programming and, well, his hollow computer, which I still find pretty dope. But anyway, Izuku continues to tinker with some of the settings on the nanotechnology, as well as trying to find ways to improve them so that they can withstand better attacks and stuff. Not and stuff, but like debris and things like that. He's also working on the overdrive suit, which is basically just the suit covering the original suit that gives basically the Nomu Buster armor. Izuku's busy working on that, as well as trying to find a way to allow the medical. Um, Izuku's trying to find a way to allow the medical nanobots to last longer, and what he comes up with is a wireless generator. He decides that he will be working on that, focusing on that as a main, as he continues to work on that for the rest of the night. He gets down the blueprints, and by the time everybody else wakes up, Izuku's already started tinkering in, well, on some of the originating microbots in his room still. So yeah, Izuku sleeps in his own room. Melissa comes and knocks on the door, and Izuku tells her to come in. As soon as she comes in, she sees. Sorry, guys. She sees parts of robots everywhere. Not robots, but like pieces of technology everywhere. Izuku had dismantled a whole lot of things, and she was kind of annoyed at this. But then she was annoyed at this until Izuku basically swivels out from his chair where he was busy working under not a microscope, basically a magnifying glass to work with the nanotechnology, and then slides back over to his computer as he starts typing. Melissa sees what he's typing on, and she closes in as she sees what he's doing. He's already started innovating on the medical nanotechnology. She's extremme happy about this and immediately asks him what's going on. Izuku says he found a way for the medical nanobots to work a lot longer, and Melissa is really intrigued. Izuku explains the whole concept to her as the two start basically just swerving around the room, bouncing ideas back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. As eventually some of the Titans, they come knock on the door as they hear a come in from both Izuku and Melissa. Raven's kind of intrigued why Melissa's voice is there, and as soon as they step through the door, They see even more parts of technology lying everywhere, as Izuku and Melissa are once again swerving around the room, with Melissa busy working on her own personal holographic computer, which Deku did design. But anyway, Melissa and Izuku are swerving around the room on nanotechnology office chairs, which I would be really honestly jealous if if I could. I would easily do that. But anyway, the two would be swerving as whenever Izuku's at the computer, Melissa would be at the nanobot technology station where she would be updating a small amount here and there and then swerve back to the computer to check the innovations that Izuku had made, as well as Izuku swerving back over to the nanotechnology to apply what he just innovated on to the nanobot. The Titans would see the unison and teamwork between the two as their jaws would drop, seeing as the two never seem to miss a beat, they're always in sync. Raven would slowly hover over as she asked what they're doing. That's when Melissa and Izuku would simultaneously start explaining that what they're doing is they're trying to increase the battery capacity as well as the energy capacity of the medical nanobots, meaning that they should last longer without a power source, but they're also trying to create a wireless power source that'll keep the microbots up and running at all times. Raven would have understood this as she'd say, well, why don't you use something based off of the Wi-Fi system? Just the exact same way routers transmit Wi-Fi throughout a set area of effect. Why don't you try doing that with an energy output? Izuku's head would have snapped up as he immediately just rolled over to the microwave as he started dismantling it, and then, sorry guys, to the kettle and started dismantling that. He used the microwaves. When the microwave's on, you will get radiation particles. Yeah, well, basically radiation that would heat up your food, and the kettle for the base that would basically allow you to transmit the electricity. So Izuku would do that as he'd quickly tune a handful of nanobots to the wavelength that the now micro kettle or microwave kettle system would be hooked up to, as he'd switch it on or plug it in and switch it on. Well, yeah, the deactivated nanobots would immediately receive the power as they would start looking for any injuries in the room. Izuku would have looked at Raven as he'd jump out of his chair, sprint over and hug her, telling her she's a genius. That's when Melissa would say, "Good job," as the two would quickly get back to work as they would be working on a more permanent source, one that could be charged and moved on the go. The two would eventually come up on the idea of basically a micro generator which could basically dish out a lot of power, enough power to power a skyscraper for about 5 weeks. I know that doesn't sound much, but seeing as the nanotechnology is extremely small and doesn't need much charge, that could last the nanotechnology for over 50 years. No, you know what? Let's dull it down. 10 years. The nanotechnology would last for 10 years using that one battery. Zuko would then toss the capsule over to Raven and tell her that that's her personal capsule. She came up with the idea, and she deserves one. As Raven would smile and tuck it into one of the, well, she'd slide it onto the rope that's around her waist that you can see in the thumbnail. All the other Titans would be kind of, well, jealous at this, but then they'd see that Izuku's quickly working up on a lot more. They would have seen Izuku's blueprints and schematics that he had put up against the wall as Beast Boy and Cyborg. Well, Cyborg would walk over to the schematics as well as Beast Boy would be looking at the pictures that Izuku had designed. Robin would be looking through all the stuff combined as he'd suggest that Izuku tries to implement weapons into the suit itself so that they would be a bit more of a long range and defensive technique for Izuku. Izuku would have taken this to heart as he quickly slid back over to his computer and swapped out to a design panel where he basically designed a extremely powerful nanotechnology shield that would allow him to basically tank kinetic energy, basically like shock absorption, but it would take the kinetic energy and turn that into actual energy for the suit itself. As Izuku would say, thanks, and then he would get to work implementing the new program into the nanotechnology. Cyborg would be looking at the schematics and blueprints that he found on the wall, as he'd see exactly how the nanobots are made. That's when he'd walk over to Izuku and tell him that he could make things just 2% more efficient by swapping, by moving the core reactor, not the core reactor, but the core, and then the processing unit and the motherboard about a small centimeter to the side, and then adding a small gap hole. Um, not a small gap hole, basically a tiny cooling fan. Not a tiny cooling fan. Basically a liquid nitrogen release, which doesn't take much at all. Izuku would have looked at it and then thought over it, as he'd say that might work, but then you also have to account for the refilling of the uh, basically the I forgot what it was. Basically dry ice, yeah, that stuff. Cyborg would have then thought about it, as he'd say, yeah, this actually is one of the most efficient ways that I can see it being used. But here's my question: how the hell do you get it to regulate the body temperature? Izuku would have then told him that he uses the nanotechnology, and if it's the nanotechnology would automatically overheat. Which Cyborg said, yeah, I can see that. It's a pretty obvious flaw. But then Izuku would state that that's exactly the flaw that I'm using. Instead of having the nanotechnology overheat in general, it is pointed into one thing. As Cyborg would ask what that is. As Izuku would put on the suit, as he'd point to his chest where you can see there's the green part. Yeah, Izuku would say, point at that and say, it's all directed towards this. It takes the heat and then turns that into a type of turns that into energy that will fuel the nanobots again. So I would think about it and say that's a genius idea. So basically, the nanobots are creating their own energy at the same time. Izuku would nod as he then slide back over to the schematics. As he'd start working back on the Hulk bus, the Nomu Buster. Cyborg would walk over as he'd say, so this one also has an overheating problem. Now I take it you can't use it in the exact same way. Well, fix it in the exact same way. Izuku would nod, telling him that there's a lot more nanobots, which means he can't spread the amount of energy evenly throughout all of them. So basically, they just get supercharged instantaneously by the large amount of heat, thus causing them to overheat even more. As Cyborg would say, why not just divert half the heat into energy and use the other half as either a flamethrower or a booster system for the suit itself? Izuku would have thought about this, as he'd say that's really smart. He could use it to charge the boosters whilst charging the nanobots, which Izuku immediately started implementing. Then he had Melissa check the programming once and twice. He had Melissa give the programming a twice over before she nodded and said, "That's great." Starfire would have floated near, as Beast Boy would have told him that the design is cool and all, but don't you think he can shift it just a bit? As Izuku would ask him what he meant, as Beast Boy would say, the suit is cool, but the way it's the fit. Shouldn't you have a bit more padding so that it would actually protect you against large attacks like the Nomu? Izuku would have said that is a valuable point, as he would have implemented a 3 nanobot layer, giving him like 3 times the thickness. Starfire would have slid in, as she told him that maybe as well with the Nomu Buster he could implement a weaponry system that could divert some of the heat. Like if he had a sword, he could divert heat into the sword and then use it as a weapon to cut through solid steel or debris, or even if need be, disarm an opponent. Izuku would have thought about this, as he would have agreed, saying that that would be a good course of action, as he would have implemented a new weaponry system for the Nomu Buster. The Titans would have been all working at this, as Raven would have been happy to see that all of them had given Izuku help. Then she'd realize that this is the kind of thing that Starfire was talking about. Raven would float over and tell him that maybe he should work on implementing a new transport method. As Izuku would ask her what she means. As Raven would say, well, you are constantly carrying around those small boxes where the nanotechnology would basically leak out of. But maybe you should work on developing a transport method that would work more effectively, seeing as you still need to drop that down to the ground before the nanotechnology pours out. Like your watch. If you like the original statement with your watch, you could double tap that and then it would pour out over your body. As Izuku would say, that's a good point. Then Raven would go on to say that maybe he should work on a tiny dimensional. No, I'm not going to give him dimensional rift. That's way too scientific for this right now. But basically, Raven would be thinking about it as she'd say, for now the pods would have to do, but I suggest you at least have a proper method of transporting them on your back without it having to look suspicious, like a specific kind of backpack that would um a specific kind of backpack that would have the pod stationed in a specific order and then activate them as time would progress. Izuku would think about this as he'd say that's a valuable point. And just after that, he would quickly start working on the design for the backpack as well. While he was doing that, David had walked into the room and said, "What's going on here?" He would then see that a bunch of the appliances were now dismantled, and he had strung up blueprints and posters everywhere. David would immediately get giddy at this as he'd jump into the fray and start looking over everything, as he'd say, "This is really well done. Well done, well done, well done. So, what's the next one?" And Zuko would say that he's not building a new type of nanotechnology, but rather he's working on improving the already or existing nanotechnology. David would nod his head profusely as he'd quickly give everything a three times over, as he'd say, "All of this is looking like you taking into consideration what happened in your last, well, your actual fight, your first fight." All of the Titans would have been shocked at this, as they just said this, so that was Izuku's first fight. As Izuku would say, yeah, it's nothing like the training simulations where you give a set programming. The beast was uncontrollable and mindless, so it was basically just an animalistic fight, which I need to take in consideration. As he'd quickly slide on back over to the programming, as he'd work on getting us an AI system that could function, well, not function, but could basically run some diagnostic checks for him. He would quickly whip up a small program, as the program would start running a diagnostic check for him. Izuku would decide that he wanted to make an AI instead. So he would take the basics of the program and add a bunch of other programs together and then give it a intelligence as well as a voice. The program that I will be calling it will be, wait for it, Widow. Get it? Because Widow's a type of spider. But anyway, Izuku would have gotten Widow up and running. As Widow would have run the diagnostic checks on all the nanobots, as she would have given out a small flaw in the vehicle type nanotechnology, that the suit had to be active for the technology to be in effect. Izuku would have taken this to heart, as he would have decided that he would implement an effect that could work. Raven and the rest of the Titans would be confused, asking, what do you mean vehicle technology, nanotechnology?" Izuku would say that he had a special kind of technology that could repurpose or upgrade any vehicle that he had shot it onto. But it seems that it would be inactive as soon as the suit is inactive, which means the vehicle that I had chosen would then go back to being the original vehicle, and I wouldn't be able to access it again. Cyborg would then say, "So basically, you're trying to set up a wireless link between your suit and the vehicle, which would allow the vehicle to find you at any given point in time and still work perfectly without you being having to be in your suit." as Izuku would nod and say that's the plan. Cyborg would have thought about this as he said, "What about using the vehicle? What about using the energy system for the nanotechnology and implementing one of the small generators into the vehicle, thus keeping the nanotechnology active at all times?" Izuku would have thought about this as he would say that that's actually a really smart idea, as he'd quickly start working on a mobile transport unit version of the generator schematics. All of this is just blueprints. Like, there is nothing going on. They're not actually building anything yet, but all of this has just been blueprints and updates and schematics. The only things that were practically made here was the AI, or just the intelligence, and then of course the busted toaster and microwave. Those were the only things made here. So yeah, time 26 minutes. I'm gonna keep rolling with it. So eventually they would finish up and the Titans would all leave the room, with Izuku walking a little closer to Raven this time. Starfire would have noticed this, and so would Raven, as well as Melissa, but all of the others wouldn't be paying it much mind. Izuku would then pull Raven to the side as he tells her that half the time things are going to get really, really hairy and really, really dangerous, so he just wanted to give her something. He would then proceed to pass her a small watch, which Raven would take, and she'd ask what this was. Izuku would tell her that this is a watch that contains the medicinal nanotechnology as well as the vehicle and power cancelling nanotechnology, seeing as she doesn't really need a suit. Just shoot the vehicle nanotechnology on a vehicle and apply this power generator to it, and then you can use it whenever you please. Raven would have nodded at this, as internally she would have been happy, seeing as, oh fuck, I need to burp, bro. Like, I want to burp but I can't burp. It's a nightmare. But anyway, she would have nodded. Internally, she would have been grateful for this, because this could save her and her friends' lives at any given point in time, as well as the medical nanotechnology and, of course, the power cancelling, which she would have taken into account of how she would fight her father using these. They would then go downstairs and have breakfast, as Inka would have been waiting basically in the dining room of the hotel. As they'd all enter, and Inka would ask what had happened. This is when David would say that they had a bit of a tinkering spree. Inka would have spit dropped as she asked how many appliances did he dismantle this time, with Izuku saying only two. Inka's head would have shut up immediately after this and say, "Only two? Wow, I'm surprised. Usually you'd run through an entire floor." As Izuku would say, "No, I can't really use much of the stuff here. I have to wait to get back to the Island. Um, well, I have to wait to get back to the academy before I can actually start implementing my new ideas. The only thing that I do have up and running at the moment, though, is the AI." Which Inko would have been like, "What do you mean, the AI?" Izuku would then pull out his phone as a holographic device. Well, a hologram would shoot out above it. As you would see a female, basically Raven without the cloak, as the female would say, "Hi, I am Widow. How can I help you?" Everybody at the table would have been surprised that Izuku would have done this, and they would have realized that this figure looks like Raven. With Melissa asking, "Why does she look like Raven?" Izuku would have said it's because, well, Raven was the first to give an idea on the medical nanotechnology, which I had been struggling on all night. So I decided to use her as a base model for Widow. Everybody would have been shocked that Izuku had chosen her, with Melissa asking a question that would shock all the Titans. "Are you sure it's not going to like her?" Izuku's face would have turned blood red at this, as he would say, "Well, you see, it's kind of complicated." Everybody would have been curious at this, as well as Raven, as Izuku would say, Well, anyway, the AI is the only thing that I physically have built up until now, as well as a wireless power generator for the nanobots, but it would only work if plugged in. So I have to get back to the academy and then physically input how to get the generators up and running there. As Izuku would then say, I also have a bunch of updates to make to the suit, so it should take me about 3 days before I'll leave the lab again. Melissa would have said, 3 days? Only 3 days? Wow. You really have worked, your efficiency's really gone up. As the Titans would have asked, what do you mean his efficiency's gone up? Melissa would then explain that when he started out with this nanotechnology programming thing and everything, he'd been stuck in the lab for basically a month. Everybody would have been shocked at this as they asked, how did he survive? Izuku would then say, well, there's a vending machine, so I got my food and my drinks there. I mean, I do have a blow up mattress, so I slept there. As this is when the Titans would ask, how long did you sleep though? Izuku would then reply with, about a week. About a week's worth of sleep. Everybody would have, all the Titans would have been shocked at this, asking how the hell he's capable of working in such conditions. Izuku would reply, easy, all I really need is my mind up and running. I can just hook it up to the computer and then have my mind working while my body's resting. The Titans would have nodded, but still been confused at this, but eventually they would accept it. Izuku would then have something to eat as he would walk off. Well, everybody would have something to eat as they'd walk off. Izuku would go back to the go back to UA as he'd walk into class 1A and everybody would be thanking him. He would then ask Aizawa if he could round up the teachers as well as the principal because he needs to talk. Aizawa would nod as he'd tell the students to calm down and that Izuku should stay here for the time being. He'll call him when everything is set up. Izuku would nod as he'd walk over to Bakugo. The entire class would then immediately swarm him, asking him a lot of questions. This kinda made Izuku a bit more shy and tedious as he'd slowly start backing away from the glaring class who wanted their questions answered. Izuku then told them that that if they sit down and give him a chance, he will explain everything. So all of them sat down and Izuku had started at one point and worked through the class with their questions, with some of the girls asking if he's single and some of the boys asking how the hell he got so strong, as well as Bakugo asked him, will he ever become a bloody damn hero? Izuku had answered the question, yes, I'm single. First, second, I'm not really that strong. I just spend a lot of time working with technology and heavy objects, so my body tends to get built more, as well as my mind. And, of course, the nanotechnology boosts my physical strength. As he'd look at Bakugo and say, I'm already a hero, Kachan. I'm helping so many lives. That's when the PDA, no, not the PDA, the intercom would go off as Aizawa would call Izuku to the principal's office. Fuck my English again. Izuku would say that he'd see them later as he'd walk to the principal's office. He'd open the door and walk in as Izuku would say that he's found a way to get his medicinal nanotechnology up and running, and that he'd like to get some of them out to the hero agencies in the next week. He's going to go back to the Island Academy and then start building some of the nanotechnology, the upgrades to the nanotechnology there. And then he'll send them through to the hero agencies. Nezu nodded as he would have then sent a message to all the hero agencies, as Izuku would have spent the rest of the day chilling with Bakugo Class 1A, as well as interacting with Class 1B, and the general studies. Saying as Izuku wasn't from the school, Monoma didn't really hate him, but he did realize that Izuku was the one that saved Class 1A kids, and he asked him if Monoma asked if Izuku thinks he's better than him. Izuku would have replied, no, I'm actually quirkless, so I don't think I'm better than anybody. But I try my best to help everybody. Monoma, as well as the entire Class 1B, class, well, basically the entire school would have been shocked, seeing as there are some kids that heard it and the rumor spread like wildfire. By the end of the break, Izuku was swarmed by the entire UA. As, sorry guys, a bunch of the kids wanted to know what the hell was going on. Izuku had walked out as he told Izuku that he should probably head upstage and speak through the microphone, seeing as Izuku was also quite interested. Izuku would then walk up as he'd see Melissa, David, his mom, and then the Titans walking in, with Bakugo sitting in the front row. Izuku would then explain that he's been working at the Island Technological Academy as he's been developing his nanotechnology, which all of them had seen in action before. Everybody had nodded and they asked, "You said you were quirkless." Izuku would then nod as he say, "I am indeed quirkless." This is when a bunch of the kids would ask, "What the hell do you mean? I thought you had a super intelligence quirk." Izuku would then explain that he has no such thing, and that he's just really smart and really gifted with a friend that he can bounce ideas off of, constantly increasing his own brain power. They would nod, and then one of the class 1A boys would ask, "How the hell did you hold your own against a beast that was built to take down All Might?" This is what would shock all the kids, as Izuku would say, "Well, first off, I used one of the nanotechnologies that I used against Mirio, this being the quirk cancelling nanotechnology. It cancelled what seemed to be his shock absorption, which was helpful seeing as it really did take some damage. Near the end, I decided that I would use my highly experimental, um, all purpose nanotechnology armor, which wasn't ready yet, and if I hadn't tweaked it a bit, it probably could have blown me to pieces. Everybody would have been shocked and asked why the hell he did it. Izuku would then reply with, "Well, it's a hero's job to save those that can't save themselves, even if it means risking their own life in the process. I wasn't just about to let my friends or my friends' friends die, because I couldn't do anything. I'd rather go out protecting those that could change the world than go out watching those that could change the world go out. You understand?" Everybody would nod, and the teachers would feel more inspired to do their job so much better, seeing as this child had truly embodied what it meant to be a pro hero. And that's where I'll be ending it off, guys. I do apologize, this one was a bit more eventful, and I hoped that I could get you guys a bit more interested. But next up is the sports festival. Unfortunately, Izuku won't be in that, but Izuku will be helping with the follow up, if you know what I'm talking about. So, see y'all in the next part, and I'm Titan signing out. Peace.